Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Tuesday study session of the Pierce County Council. It's Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. The time is 12:01 p.m. All members are present except for Vice Chair Campbell, who is excused. With the indulgence of council, we have some staff here from outside the office of the county council here to help present. And in order to respect their time, I'd ask that we rearrange our agenda a little bit. My suggestion is we go straight into item number 2 to review today's council meeting agenda. And then after that, come to the estimated costs of new indigent defense caseload standards. And then we'll go to the rest of our agenda. Is there any objection to moving our agenda around like that? Thank you. Not seeing any. Let's move into item number 2, review of today's council meeting agenda. Ms. Long, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. So this is your council meeting agenda for this afternoon's regular 3 p.m. meeting. It has been amended. We did review the consent agenda yesterday with all the changes that you see highlighted. So unless you have questions on that, I will continue. So we'll go to section 7. There are 2 proclamations today and 1 presentation. The first up is proclaiming October 17th, 2024 as Great Shakeout Day in Pierce County, and that was requested by Councilmember Campbell. Next up is proclaiming October 19th, 2024 as Community Conflict Resolution Day in Pierce County, and that was requested by Councilmembers Hitchen and Campbell. So I'm gonna guess maybe Councilmember Hitchen will read this one.
Sure.
Councilmember Campbell has the other one. Okay, and then the presentation is Pierce Transit Destination 2045 Long Range Plan presentation, and that will be with Pierce Transit staff. You do have 3 resolutions this afternoon for consideration. These are all similar. These all are approving the 2024-2025 funding recommendations of the Pierce County Human Services Department, but for different topics. All 3 of these received due pass recommendations in rules on October 7th. So the first of the 3 is our 2024-212, and this is related to farmers markets. The next is our 2024-213, and this is funding for equipment and capital needs for food banks. And the third is our 2024-214, and this is approving funding for related to food insecurity. Moving to section 9 ordinances, you have 1 item here, and that's O 2024-552. This is vacating a portion of 100th Street East. And this received a due pass at EIDC on September 24th. And those are your agenda items for this afternoon's meeting. I'm not aware of any amendments to anything today.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Are there questions about today's council meeting agenda? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. As indicated, we're going to move to other business. Item number B here. A few months ago, when it became really clear to me that there was an important decision coming before the state Supreme Court related to a recommendation put forward by the State Bar Association around indigent defense or public defense and new caseload standards that are being proposed by the State Bar Association to the state Supreme Court, who is the decision maker here on these kinds of rules. I got really concerned about, of course, making sure that we have fair and equitable access to justice and the cost of delivering that service. And I was not certain that we had a really good grasp of what the costs were going to be for the proposed caseload standards. And because of that lack of confidence, I've asked our chief of staff if she would work with key partners here within county government, namely our finance department, our very capable finance department and also our very capable Department of Assigned Counsel to really look at these caseload standards as being proposed by the State Bar Association and really trying to put pen to paper about what the costs would be to Pierce County in particular in the near term and over the next over the implementation cycle of such standards and how they might be different than the current standards. So I'm really grateful to the great capability of our chief of staff and her bringing in the finance department and the Department of Assigned Counsel to do just that. Ms. Murray, do you have any other lead into this? Okay, well, thank you for your leadership, Ms. Murray. So with that, I just want to further remind members that so again, the decision maker here on caseload standards is the state Supreme Court, and we're in an active public input opportunity. The state Supreme Court is receiving written public input through the end of this month, October, and they've already had one in-person public input session, and there'll be another in November after the close of the written public input session. I certainly anticipate the council, we'll see if the executive wants to collaborate on this and if we can get on the same page about what comment might be. But at a minimum, I'm going to suggest the county council weigh in with information to the court about what the impact here, potential trade-offs are. But again, to ground the council in what the cost implications are for such a thing, we really needed to bear down and really understand the details here. So with that, I'm going to invite up Amy Scott German with our Finance Performance Management Division, and also Michael Kawamura, our Director of Assigned Counsel, who's here to certainly answer any questions as a subject matter expert. So thank you, Director Kawamura, for being here and your expertise. But let me turn it over to Amy Scott German, who's going to lead us in a brief presentation as they've done this analysis on our behalf. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Amy Scott German. I'm a senior research and data analyst with the finance department. Next slide, please. This short presentation today will cover the Washington State Bar Association's proposed changes to indigent defense caseload standards, review assumptions and limitations of the model we've created, and provide a summary of the FTE and cost impact estimates. Next slide, please. As some additional context, in March of 2024, the Washington State Bar Association's Board of Governors adopted updated standards for indigent defense services as proposed by the Council on Public Defense and forwarded those standards to the Washington Supreme Court for consideration. The WASVA standards are consistent with, but more comprehensive than, the Washington Supreme Court standards for indigent defense included in the Washington State Court rules. These changes were informed by a January 2022 state study by the Council on Public Defense, as well as a national study from July of 2023 that highlighted the excessive caseloads of public defense attorneys. The court's rules require attorney compliance with professional and ethical obligations, and all public defense attorneys must certify every quarter that they have complied with the court rule standards. The Council on Public Defense has recommended a 2-year phased implementation of the new standards beginning in July of 2025 to give local governments time to plan. Specifically, the new standards modify caseload limits, support staff ratios, and attorney qualifications over the course of 2025 to 2028, with full implementation of all changes by the beginning of 2028. Next slide, please. The proposed changes, again, impact 3 categories: caseload limits, support staff, and attorney qualifications. In terms of caseload limits, the proposed standards reduce the maximum caseloads for public defenders by roughly 2/3. The current standards allow for 150 felony case credits or 300 misdemeanor case credits to be assigned annually. Under the proposed standards, case credit limits would be reduced to 47 felony case credits or 120 misdemeanor case credits by 2027. In terms of support staff, the new standards move from recommending that public defenders have access to support staff to requiring that defense agencies maintain specific ratios of support staff to attorneys. Specifically, the updated guidance from the Washington State Bar Association requires ratios of 1 case supervisor per 10 attorneys starting in 2025, a maximum ratio of 1 legal assistant per 4 attorneys beginning in 2028, and a maximum ratio of 1 investigator per 3 attorneys and 1 mitigation specialist per 3 attorneys beginning in 2028. In terms of attorney qualifications, the updated standards clarify the experience required for public defenders to qualify for specific cases. These proposed standards reflect the current guidance, and implementation timelines or standards may change based on Washington Supreme Court decisions. Next slide, please. Before sharing the results of this model, I'll review the assumptions and limitations of it. Beginning in August of this year, the Finance Department collaborated with the Department of Assigned Counsel, who are the subject matter experts, to develop and refine a model. Analytical support was provided by Finance, while DAC provided context, clarification, and key data points for inclusion in the model. The model assumes that maximum workloads and support staff ratios fully align with the new standards by 2028. Using current practices from the Department of Assigned Counsel, each FTE is assumed to work 1,800 hours per calendar year, and that reduces to 1,650 hours by 2027, as was specified in the proposed standards. The national estimates for time spent on cases prepared in the RAND study are used and applied to cases here in Pierce County, as county-specific hour estimates were unavailable. It's worth noting that these are estimates and the actual case weights or hours required per case may vary. FTE estimates for current attorneys' non-case work, for example, time spent on therapeutic courts or arraignments, are used to account for non-case work of additional FTEs as well. Finally, estimates are based off of 2023 caseloads, which may differ from future caseload. This model can be modified to handle different key assumptions. For example, staffing levels and caseloads, phase-in hours and case credits, non-case assignments for attorneys, salaries and benefits, including COLAs and step increases, overhead costs, and external costs can all be adjusted to recalculate the results. As such, it improves upon the estimates provided from other organizations, such as the Washington State Association of Counties, by allowing for Pierce County to use our own attorney assignment practices to estimate the impacts. However, there are a few notable limitations of the model. Specifically, statewide increased competition for attorneys is likely to influence market rates for external services. Overhead costs may differ depending on the phase-in approach selected, and current case estimates for external panel representation reflects double the number of cases assigned to staff attorneys in the conflict office for estimation purposes. Next slide, please. Annual additional FTE estimates for attorneys consider new standards for maximum hours, case credits, and attorney qualifications. The model takes into consideration potential differences in qualifications among groups of lawyers. It calculates the estimated additional full-time equivalent or FTE needed by subtracting the number of existing qualified attorneys from the higher value of either the attorneys needed to meet the hour maximums or case credit maximums for each attorney group, adult or juvenile, and qualification, felony, high qualified, or misdemeanor. The model estimates that in 2025, around 82 additional attorney FTEs will be needed, increasing to around 92 additional attorney FTEs by 2027. In line with the proposed standards, adjustments to attorney caseloads are expected to be fully implemented by 2027, while support staff ratios are implemented starting in 2028. The model estimates that around 30 additional support staff FTEs will be needed in 2025, increasing to around 93 FTE by 2028.
I just have to emphasize, these are additional on top of FTEs that exist today in the Department of Assigned Counsel. These are not human beings that exist today. These are additional on top of the staffing levels in our Department of Assigned Counsel. Sorry, additional to what the FTE allotment is today. Sorry, Ms. Sherman.
This model uses the same support staff assumptions for all attorneys, both internal or external panel attorneys working on Pierce County cases. This means it's a conservative estimate to illustrate potential staffing needs, though actual FTEs for support staff may vary based on the nature of support provided. The actual staffing rates during that implementation phase leading into 2027 may also differ from the model due to real-world influences of recruitment and hiring practices. However, by 2028, when all of the standards are expected to be fully implemented, the model reflects the additional staff requirements compared to the current in order to comply with the proposed standards. Next slide, please. The Department of Assigned Counsel provided high and low salary estimates for each attorney type and support staff type to generate these estimates, with the high estimate reflecting a high range of salaries and the low estimate reflecting a low range of salaries. Furthermore, new caseload standards are likely to impact county expenditures beyond attorney and support staff costs. These costs include additional strain on the general administrative capacity, for example, janitorial services, IT, accounting, and as such, a per-person indirect rate of around $21,000 annually, which was provided by Pierce County Finance, is multiplied by the total additional FTE needed to extrapolate these additional costs. Additionally, future cost of living adjustments and our step increases at a rate of 2.5% per year are included in salary and benefit cost estimates from 2026 through 2029. In terms of professional external services, Department of Assigned Counsel's current budget does include a professional services line item that is used for external representation. Because of this, the model's cost estimates may be higher than the actual implementation costs require due to some overlap of those funds. The model estimates that the implications of these new standards will require around $25 million additional dollars in 2025, around $29 million additional dollars in 2027, and around $39 million additional dollars in 2029. Next slide, please. In summary, the model estimates that in order to comply with the standards as written, by 2028, Pierce County will need an additional 92.54 support staff, 5.16 FTE for conflict center attorneys, 7.7 FTEs for juvenile attorneys, 59.5 adult attorneys, and 19.3 external panel attorney FTEs. In terms of costs, these changes would require significant investments annually. For example, around $25 million in 2025, an additional $29 million in 2027, and an additional $39 million in 2029. For additional details, including FTE and cost estimates by category and type, please see the full model estimate that's linked on this slide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for you and the team's very good work in analyzing this, working with counsel office staff and Department of City Council to understand what the proposal is that's being advocated for by some before the state Supreme Court, and understanding what the impacts would be to Pierce County, in specific, the financial impacts. I'm going to continue with questions and then open it up to my colleagues. Folks can see how serious this is. This has really significant financial implications to Pierce County and other counties, every other county in Pierce County. We are not alone. And I need to stress that, of course, we will continue to, in any scenario, deliver constitutionally sound public defense to for the people of Pierce County. And there's no question that that is what we will continue to do and what we want to do. When you begin to understand, though, the cost implications of the proposal that's in front of the court, you start seeing significant costs, and there is significant trade-offs to how we use our very limited available local revenues. And unless these revenues are coming from the state, I simply do not see how these revenues exist in local government. And if it's spent here, then that means it's not spent on behavioral health or affordable housing or our homelessness crisis or our parks or treatment or other parts of the justice system, other important aspects of the justice system. So there are really significant consequences here to understanding what the proposal is. Before I go on, I do want to make sure we're grounded in the terminology. So I will ask Director Kawamura to come and support you if needed. There's a term that is used throughout this conversation. The term is, excuse me, I want to make sure I don't speak, case credits. So it's not a case, it's not a traditional caseload like, one felony or a group of felonies. The term is case credits. You heard Ms. German reference that in her presentation. So could either you or Director Kawamura just unpack for lay people what this term case credits is and help us understand the term, please?
Good afternoon, Council Chair, Council members. So the term case credits, I think the easiest way to understand this is think of the type of cases that come through the system. You run the gamut of something that's really not very complex. Someone who's stopped driving down the street and has a suspended driver's license. They're charged with a crime and they go through the criminal justice process. It's not an exorbitant number of hours that it takes to work through that case and get it resolved. And then on the far end, someone is charged with committing a Class A felony, a homicide. And encompassed in that is significant amounts of evidence that could involve hundreds of hours of review. It could also involve experts. It could involve mental health issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so really this concept of a case credit looks at the various types of cases that an individual can be assigned to represent, and it puts an hourly coefficient on that type of case. And my understanding is that's what the RAND study did. It surveyed lawyers around the country with various types of cases, and it came up with the average number of hours it would take an attorney to for example, represent someone on a homicide versus a low-end misdemeanor case. And so that's really what this amounts to. So for example, a serious homicide would be counted as not one case, but 8. And a lower level misdemeanor could be counted as a half a case or 1 case or a case and a half. And each one of those is attributed a certain amount of hours. So when you come up with an equation, you have X number of lawyers, they each work 1,800 hours a year. You just do the math. And then you look at your county and what your filing trends are and the type of cases, you attribute a certain hourly amount to each one of those cases. And then you come up with an hourly amount per year that the staff can handle. You divide it by the number of lawyers, and that pretty much gives you how many lawyers you're going to need. So that's really, I think, the easiest way to look at this. You can really get caught in the weeds about how much is each case worth. The Supreme Court adopted standards several years ago, and we've been adhering to those standards. And we adopted a case weighting model as well, with the same understanding that certain cases take longer than others. This essentially is doing the same thing, but obviously what it's doing is attributing far more hours to each case than what was done based on a 1970 study. So that, in essence, I think, is the easiest way to describe what's happening here.
Thank you for explaining that to us,
Yeah.
Director Kawamura. Again, I really wanted to ground us in what the model what the caseload standard request by the Bar Association is for Pierce County in particular, because I'm going to ask the council to weigh in this really serious conversation to the state Supreme Court, and I wanted to make sure we were grounded in this detail. Also, I really believe this is going to be a huge discussion in the upcoming legislative session, beginning in January 2025, about caseload standards, about who bears the cost of continual improvement to the criminal justice system, and in particular public defense. And we really need to be grounded with this kind of information in order to be the most effective advocates possible. So I remain very grateful to our staff who dove into the detail and helped us analyze and create a cost model that is accurate for Pierce County to the best of our knowledge. I'll note that while I think the State Association of Counties is trying, they're working with 39 different counties who do public defense very differently. We do public defense largely in-house under Director Kawamura's leadership. We did authorize a conflict office, if folks remember, during the budget process, which is literally just that, attorneys that aren't under the supervision of Director Kawamura because there is a legal conflict with a client or group of clients. So there are external attorneys who are providing public defense to those individuals, not under the direct supervision of Mr. Kawamura. Different counties do this differently. Some counties outsource all of their public defense. They don't have any internal public defense. Some do conflict offices with internal like ours. There's different models out there. The point here is, I think the State Association of Counties has begun to do this, but in my reading of their early data, it has the costs for Pierce County for the exact same caseload standards, closer to $5 or so million in the early years. You can see that's a big difference from the model we have here, which is closer to $25 million in the very early years. So we really needed to begin to cost this out and model this for us and really dive into the detail, not lean on others' information. Let me stop there. Let me see what questions and comments other council members have. Councilor Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. I will throw it and see who wants to answer the question, but just can you remind the council about cities and towns and your office? Is it a part of our duty to do that on behalf of all Pierce County citizens, and the cities and towns don't support that, or do they have their own?
The very basic general response to that would be that if there's a felony committed in a city within Pierce County, then it's a county obligation. If it's a misdemeanor offense that occurs within the city, then it would be up to the city to provide either a court or some mechanism to provide representation for those services. So, for example, we have an existing agreement with the city of Tacoma. That's not something that Pierce County pays for. It's the city of Tacoma that reimburses us for those services. So
So then I guess to the question with this model, does it capture the changes that might need to happen for the cities and towns portion of misdemeanors, or are they completely left out and this is just county implications? I'm seeing a head nod. Okay.
every jurisdiction would have to do their own impact model as to how it impacts them individually, every city.
Okay. Be an interesting conversation to have with some of our cities to see what they're thinking as well, just to coordinate. And then my second question, probably to Amy, is around the estimated costs where it says the total estimated annual cost for 24 to 29 with the graph. Is that total or that's the additional costs? Those numbers are additional or the total cost?
Those would be the additional costs on top of what is already allocated.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was capturing that and clearly understood it was additional dollars. Okay, thank you. And I too have heard the same number of $4 to $5 million is the anticipated impact to Pierce County from the Washington State Association of Counties. And I appreciate that. They're two very different numbers. Like 5 and 25 are different numbers, especially when you add $1 million to the end of that. So I think really trying to figure out what those differences are so that we can make sure that we're advocating at the Supreme Court level because there are definitely significant impacts. And if ours are these way, if our numbers are this high, I wonder about our other jurisdictions across the state as far as how they modeled it and what happened there. So I appreciate the work, and we may be phoning a friend to talk to the Wasatch peers to see what happened there. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for pushing on this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for those thoughts and questions. Again, today is meant to really begin grounding all of us so that we're working from the same level of information and see how serious this is so we can be good advocates, as Councilor Hitchin indicates, and understand what may be coming down the pike and impacting our budget. In the spirit of grounding us in common information, Director Kawamura, today, there are caseload standards that your office operates under that was set by the Supreme Court about a decade ago. Is that accurate? You currently operate under a standard that is set by the state Supreme Court many years ago.
Yeah, I believe the current standards were adopted in, I'm thinking '02, but it's,
A couple of decades.
I could certainly find it, but I think it was '02. And those were based on an ABA study that was done in the '70s. And so obviously things have changed significantly in the last 50 years. One thing that I neglected to mention about trying to put all this into context, I talked about annual hours, et cetera. But I think it puts this in a better perspective if you really think about hours per case. And so our work model was based on 1,800 hours a year. And I know that the state, or what the bar recently endorsed, is talking about a 1,650 work year. But just to put this in context, so if you have an 1,800 hour work year and you're limited to 110 cases, now the current standard is 150. But to be honest, any system that's effectively representing people doesn't go to that outer limit, because that standard, again, is not what you should do or could do. That is the absolute cap or maximum. So I think it's important to think about that as well. So if you have 110 case credit maximum, that's 16.4 hours per case. So I think it kind of puts this in context. It doesn't mean that someone has 200 hours on every case. It's 16.4 hours. And if you go down to 47 cases, it's 35 hours. So I think it puts some of this in a little bit more context as to what's being discussed. So I just wanted to indicate that. So I think it helps kind of put this into some perspective of what's going on here.
It's helpful. Again, you operate under existing caseload standards that have been set some time ago, but you have existing caseload standards. You meet a sense of professional standard.
Correct.
Who oversees that? Is there an overseer outside of the executive and the council for making, for overseeing that you are indeed giving that level of service to public defense? Do you report that to someone? Do you report that to the Supreme Court or some other state agency or something?
Well, we have to report annually to the Office of Public Defense, and we give them data about what our caseloads are, what our staffing levels are, what our resources level are, et cetera, to indicate that we're meeting what's currently in play. We also are accountable to the state bar for inquiries that clients or others may have regarding what we do and how we do it. And so that's really our standard review. And then the administrative staff in our office is responsible for oversight of our attorneys to make sure that, the processes we use are legitimate and representation is adequate. So I think those are the layers of oversight that we currently have in play.
Thank you. Councilmember Morel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, definitely a huge impact to all jurisdictions. What is the perceived positive outcome out of this that the RAND report is looking for? Is it better, more professional representation, less plea bargaining? What's the outcome?
Well, I can't really speak for the RAND company itself. I haven't had direct conversations with them, but I think the overall impact or place that they see this going is that the representation of each individual person who's appointed a lawyer is done in a professional manner, and that the person has adequate time and resources to provide that quality of representation. That's my take on what this is about.
And of course, we would, and I hope what you would argue, that they are getting a professional representation at your level. But I'm just kind of curious to see what the undertow of all this is. Does it mean that we're going to go longer litigation on these cases, or how is that lens going to be viewed?
I think it's really hard to respond to that with a one-size-fits-all answer. In one context, if a person has more time on each case, the duration of litigation might actually be shorter because the amount of time to prepare in a given period of time is greater. Because if you have less cases to work on, you can work on them and not have to delay them or continue them out. It's not a unilateral system, though, obviously. You don't have absolute control over everything that happens in the system. But I think
spend more time on each one.
that would, to me, be a logical outcome of this, that you wouldn't necessarily delay things. It might get things prepared faster.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you. Actually, a comment that to Councilmember Morale and my colleagues, one of the models that some of our jurisdictions in other states are looking at is really using the public defender's office to be case managers, working on what are all the things that got this person to commit a crime that they are being charged with. And when I say all the things, it's the family, the history, any of the immediate needs they were trying to fill, whether it was a substance use, behavioral health, poverty, fill in the blank with anything that could cause someone to make a choice to do a crime, assess, and then that takes time. And then they also work on trying to solve some of those issues. So it's that, but that's not a lawyer's job. It's those other services outside. So one of the things that I know that we had talked about with Wasac when this first came down was really flipping this and saying, what if we actually did the supportive services, the case management, the work that helps support the lawyers? The lawyers worry about the courts, but we actually try and solve some of these issues so that we do not see repeat offenders, that we aren't cycling people through. And while maybe that's the intent of this and the goal, I don't think this dollar amount and blowing it up in this rate is going to serve us well. I think the intent is really to try and do some of that. I just don't agree maybe personally with how they chose to go about it. But I have seen that in several states where that has been the way they've done this. And so again, it wasn't necessarily more lawyers. It was the supportive services to help. So, thank you.
Thank you. And just to that, I think it's a very important point. I think, and where we're getting to here is us grounding ourselves and getting to agreement to weigh in to the state Supreme Court about the impacts of this and what input we want to give to the state Supreme Court. One of the central arguments I propose we make is one of those arguments, which is there are significant trade-offs to how we spend our limited dollars. We are very constrained in how we raise revenue in local government. We are artificially capped. And these dollars that are put in front of us by the finance department who analyzed it takes every available new dollar that comes into the county coffers. And Ms. DeMuth maybe can correct me, but it takes, tell me if that is hyperbole, but this seems to take in nearly every new dollar that we get. More than every new dollar that we are able to raise with our currently allowed revenue streams in county government. I'll let that sit in for a little bit. You have no other dollars to do any other initiatives, much less initiatives to get upstream on criminal behavior, or any of the other many issues I know all of us want to tackle around affordable housing and homelessness and all the things that our general fund relies on, economic development, you name it, everything that the general fund relies on. This takes up every new dollar. Folks should let that sink in. Ms. Scott German and Director Kawamura, I also want to make sure we do understand the model. You've explained how this is all inclusive of support staff and attorneys and janitorial and space, and that you were very comprehensive in this sophisticated model. Kind of building on Councilmember Morell's question about other impacts, are there any assumptions that you can make that if we were forced to implement these caseload standards and staff up in this way in the Department of Assigned Counsel, are there going to be impacts to other sides of the criminal justice system? Will there be impacts that are not in the model yet around prosecutors, judges, or other aspects of the criminal justice system? You've done a deep, deep dive into Department of Assigned Counsel. Are there going to be cost implications or any other implications that we can't tell yet in this model to prosecutors, judges, other aspects of the criminal justice system?
Is that,
Anyone qualified to give some thoughts or observations about that based on your professional judgment?
my initial thought would be that this impacts the workload of the defense side. It doesn't actually create more work. I mean, the case numbers would remain the same. What the actual impact of this is going to be on the courts and on the prosecutor, I'm not really sure.
That's fair.
I'm not really sure I'm qualified to.
That's fair. And that's a totally fair answer. I needed to ask it to see if there's other costs we should be aware of. Ms. Scott-German, I think since you and your team were lead in developing this, can we just probe a little bit more on support staff to make sure we really understand? Can you say more about support staff? Are those paralegals? Are those caseworkers? Can you say more about what we mean by support staff here? Or Director Kawamura?
It's all of those. It's what Councilmember Hitchin talked about, people that are good at going out and getting informational and background information on clients. It's in order to present material for the term called mitigation to try and get cases settled in a more favorable manner for the client. There's a lot of mental health issues obviously going on, so you need folks who are qualified to do that as well and deal with clients. There's investigation. The defense side doesn't have police departments to go out and investigate cases. So every time you need to do that, you need to hire someone. And then you have in-house support people that would, legal assistants, paralegals that would help you do the logistical things involved in case management. So it's all of those. I would say that around the state, there are different models for providing that service as well. You can have in-house staff to do all of that work. We don't do that currently. We outsource that to individuals that we pay hourly to do some of that work. The support staff is internal because I think the relationships there are more important, and you have to have that day-to-day contact. But as far as some of the other services, there will be, if this were adopted, I guess my thought would be to probably do a mix of inside staff and external as well. But you can imagine, I think some of the qualifiers here, the language when we talked about this was market conditions. If you get into this system and you've got multi-jurisdictions that don't have these services, then that creates a market condition that it's pretty easy to anticipate what that will do. I don't think it's going to drive rates down. So those are some real life things. Then the other thing about this model is you can't look at this in a vacuum, that you go from block to block to block, and we're not going to start worrying about this block until we get there. Well, that's just not real life. I mean, you have to find people, and when you find them, you have to move on that, right? So when you look at this, it's trying to look at what the actual overall impacts are. It's not really a block to block type of situation. At least I don't think it is.
Thanks for answering that. Any other questions by other members? I don't see any. I'm going to try to summarize our next steps here. First, lots of gratitude for our professional staff for their work in assisting our chief of staff and helping us to develop this really high quality understanding about the cost of the caseload standards that are in front of the Supreme Court. So thank you very much for taking this on. You were not expecting to take this on when we started this year. So thank you. I want the council to know that you can see the gravity of the impacts of this. First and foremost, all of our expectation is that those that are indigent, those that are poor, receive a constitutionally sound, professional legal defense as they are entitled to under the Constitution. And we appreciate Dr. Kawamura's leadership for so many years to ensure we deliver extremely high quality public defense. And we will always continue to do that. I believe in following this issue for some time now, this year, I think that there are some bad actors out there in other counties that are really driving this statewide discussion. I don't think we are one of them. We will get caught up perhaps if the standards do change as directed by the state Supreme Court. I think this is really driven by what I have concluded are some egregious actors elsewhere in the state that are not delivering really high quality public defense. And I'm not going to ask the professional staff in the room to comment on that. That's not appropriate. That is my observation and determination, what is driving this in front of the court. So there are other counties who don't have their public defense attorneys spend as much time, high quality time on their with their indigent defendants. And so for them to come up to a higher standard is going to cost a lot more money. We are closer to meeting the standard because we have invested in this Department of Assigned Counsel for some time. We're not that far off from the standard, though meeting the standard is very expensive compared to another county that is farther off from the standard, and it's going to be much more expensive for them to do that. Be that as it may, it's still very costly for us to meet this standard. In terms of next steps, I'm going to encourage the council that we do send a letter to the state Supreme Court. Obviously, we always want to ensure constitutionally sound, high quality public defense. And this has real impacts to other competing, very legitimate competing interests of ours. So in making those points, I think we need to point out to the court the real cost of implementing this. Even under the current proposal, the ramp up time, it seems short. And where do we find the money? The money just simply does not exist. So we need to point out the real costs. And we know our county best. So thanks to this work, we're going to be able to point out real, legitimate, accurate accounting for implementing the standards. So I think we need to point that out to the court. I think we need to point out to the court real, legitimate trade-offs. If we put all of our discretionary available new resources here, that means we're not doing other very legitimate, important public policy initiatives that run the gamut. And I think we really need to point that out to the court. Other things we need to point out include other very practical considerations like the workforce, the availability of the workforce. Does the workforce is it even available? Are we really pumping out that many attorneys in law schools? And what is the real practicality that they're going to come and work for the public defense law firm? Just are there the human bodies to do the work? Are they really available coming out of law school? These kinds of practical considerations to implement such standards. So those and perhaps other ideas, again, would make up a comment letter to the court. Here it is, October 15th. The written comment deadline is October 31. I'd like to ask our chief of staff to work with me on a draft letter that we would put forward. We would bring to council, of course, for review and discussion, and hopefully eventual concurrence on a draft that we can agree on and send to the court. And there's another there's an in-person public input opportunity that I believe we need to be at in order to provide comment to demonstrate how serious this is, especially to Pierce County. So those are some of the really specific next steps. Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you. And in full agreement with all of that. I mean, clearly, I think probably the objective of the court in looking at this is making sure that people do receive the support and the services that they should. So I'm wondering, are there any suggestions? Because I think Pierce County is clearly doing it really well. Are there any suggestions for other ways that the court can ensure that individuals statewide are receiving, the same level of service that they're receiving here and in other counties that are doing a good job? Anything else we can help the court with to achieve their objective without burdening counties that are already meeting a high standard? Just throwing that out there. I'm sure you guys have probably thought about things like that.
Well, with the current standards, there's permissive language and mandatory language, the should versus shall. I think one of the things that I think if you're looking at potentially changing the shoulds to shall, that talks about the support services that are necessary. And again, the standards that are in play right now, they were developed in the 70s. I don't think trying to say that those apply in 2024 really would be an effective way of looking at this. I think, but to provide perhaps a more graduated impact and to, start actually scrutinizing if the support services are actually being provided, which makes life for the attorney better, and they're able to do less work that they probably shouldn't be doing in the first place. I mean, all of those things create an environment where you create, I think, what the Supreme Court is trying to get to. The mechanism to make that happen, I'm not sure if it currently exists to do that, though, to go to jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I'm not really sure about that. But I mean, that as a practitioner, I think that would be, a thought that if one area is adhering to these and it makes a difference and it improves the quality of representation, then the thought would be that if every jurisdiction did that, it would likewise have the same impact. So I think that type of message, I think, would resonate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Morel.
Just looking at our overall system, would we get any benefit because we do offer a lot of diversion courts, whether it be, substance abuse, veterans court, baby court? I mean, we have a lot more wraparound services than most courts out there. So, I mean, would it be beneficial to bring that up?
I think it would. I mean, the more, if it's a therapeutic court and it provides actual resources, I mean, it's everyone's goal to get a person who's engaged in the system to get out of it. And if you think about what the impacts are for not repeatedly coming into the system for the next 20 years, that's huge. So that first, I guess the shorter term view is we're going to deal with it this way, assuming it's going to stop, and knowing it's not, it's probably not the best way to look at some things. And that's not to suggest you would do that in every situation. Obviously you wouldn't. But the more that you can get people out of this system and do it faster, well, it benefits the system as well, because then you're not going to be providing representation in court systems for the next 25 years. So it's self-perpetuating. So it's a benefit to the system just to have it, because if you don't, you'll have more cases in the system. You'll need more judges, you'll need more prosecutors, and you'll need more public defenders. So I think that's how it works. And if the court is made aware that you're doing that, then yeah, I think that would be positive. That drives though your workload, right? Because that's looked at differently than the actual case that's in the system.
Right. And I agree that this council, most of this council, has invested in therapeutic court, especially the behavioral health court, and we've chosen to tax ourselves to do that. So it shows that we've at least been proactive on that. So anything else that we can add to it, that would be great. And any insight that you have would be great too, to some of the information that we put in there. Thank you.
And again, I just wanted to say the Supreme Court will be adopting a statewide standard. It won't be jurisdiction specific. So that's what they're looking at right now. It won't apply to one jurisdiction differently than the other. It'll be statewide.
Thank you. I also want council to know that on our behalf, I've been in close coordination and communication with the elected prosecutor and the presiding judge of Superior Court to make sure they were aware of the work we were doing that we've just worked through together, so that they were just aware of this analysis, so they could have the benefit of it as well. And encourage them to take this work seriously and to comment if they saw fit to do so. You know, it goes, maybe it goes without saying, but there's another way to get to the finish line here of meeting these new standards of public defense if they went into effect. And the other way to the finish line is to charge less cases. So this is all about having public defenders meet a case credit standard, as we just noted. So there's two ways to solve that problem. You can hire more staff, as we've analyzed, and you see the cost of that, or you charge less cases and have less input into the system. So those are your levers for meeting these caseload standards. So I think we need to be eyes wide open here about what the impacts are to our budget, to community safety, to quality levels of public defense. So I'm grateful that we've spent quality time here together to begin to understand this. And again, next step is for us to work on a draft letter for council consideration for us to give our input to the court. And then there'll be steps after that. There is an ongoing conversation about what our posture is to the legislature, but that is really independent of what's in front of the state Supreme Court. Related, but independent of what's in front of the state Supreme Court. So I really suspect this is an issue that the county council will be working on for some time. So thanks for spending such good time to get grounded on good information so we can continue to work collaboratively together. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Ms. Demuth, thank you again for having your team be flexible and pivot into this work with us so ably and so quickly. It's been a real asset. And Ms. Murray, thank you for your leadership. And I know you had council staff really dig into this and take this really seriously. This too was not on your work plan or your team's work plan when we started the year. So thank you for your leadership. Okay, let's move on to external boards and commissions. We're going to call on Mr. Taylor, our Deputy Chief of Staff, to begin the discussion as always.
So council, and we've had a long afternoon, so this will be quick. Just a reminder that the Pierce County Regional Council meets this Thursday. In addition to their regular business, they have a couple of presentations. The first is a presentation on veterans programs provided by Pacific Northwest Vets. The second is a dialogue regarding the PCRC's 2025 legislative priorities. So you're familiar with the process PCRC utilizes to develop those items. And that's it. Otherwise, it's just their normal routine business at PCRC. I have nothing to report on PSRC this week.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Thank you. Do any other members have other external boards and commission items? Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a update on the Tacoma Pierce County Board of Health study session being held tomorrow. We'll be looking at the 2024 budget amendment as we move into our next board meeting. So just wanted people aware it's coming up.
Thank you. Other external boards and commission updates? I'll report on activities of the Pierce Transit Board. The Pierce Transit Board met yesterday for our monthly board meeting. The main items of business at the Pierce Transit Board really were around some additional contracts for services related to the Spanaway Transit Center. The new Spanaway Transit Center is very close to the Copperway Affordable Housing Development that we funded in Spanaway, across from the Walmart in Spanaway on Highway 7. This is a new and expanded transit center. There's some pretty significant cost escalation for this project. As we've gotten into the project, the site has been much more difficult to work with. We also are adding some aspects to the project of the Spanaway Transit Center to make it safer for transit users to utilize. For example, much more sidewalk on both sides of Pacific Highway to connect to the transit center. That was not considered in the first bid for the transit center project. The first bid was really just the site acquisition and developing the actual transit center for riders and drivers to use, also as a park and ride kind of facility. So getting to the transit center safely on foot and other modes of transportation is really important. So we're adding a significant amount of sidewalk, also a mid lane crossing, pedestrian crossing, to make crossing Pacific Highway there much more safe. It's very dangerous right now. People get hit all the time. And we anticipate people going in both directions, having to cross the street in order to utilize the transit system. So a mid-lane safe pedestrian crossing is an added element, in addition to needing to get utilities to the site from the other side of the street. I'm sure Councilmember Morel has strong appreciation for this, but it's not terribly easy to actually move power, water, and other infrastructure across or under a state highway. It proves to be very difficult and costly, and it's proving that way here. So there's been some cost escalation to this project as we've really gotten into it. So we approved a series of contracts to deal with those issues, to make it much safer to get to, and move this project along to deliver a really high quality, safe transit center for what really is the end of the line for our most productive route, which is Route 1. So wanted folks to have that update. The staff has the authority to continue to proceed on this project, and we'll see some fruits of that labor next year. Any other external boards and commission updates? Okay, not seeing any. Under chair's topics, I wanted to ask our chief legal counsel, Ms. Long, to just spend a couple of minutes refreshing for all of us some key aspects of our rules of procedure and our parliamentary procedure that we rely on to run our meetings. We all use these all the time. We can always use a refresher, myself included. And we're about to get into an incredibly busy time, I think, in working with the staff to prepare between now and the end of the year. I think we have about 40 bills to consider, 40 pieces of legislation to consider between now and the end of the year. Many of them very, very detailed and consequential. Every bill is consequential, but there's some that are more consequential than others, that very meaty, anticipating perhaps many amendments. And in order to facilitate fair debate by the council, everyone to feel fairly treated, to have their voice heard, bring their ideas to the table, and know how we lead meetings, I think we just all could be reminded about our parliamentary procedures, that we can all run our meetings in a fair and clear way. So with that, Ms. Long is going to just remind us about some key items so that we can really be clear in what we're putting on the table for debate and that sort of thing. So Ms. Long, can I hand it over to you?
Yes, thank you. And so as the chair said, this is just a refresher. What I wanted to talk about mostly was just motions. So motions about getting something before you for action and amendments. I'm not going to talk about precedents of motions and all the various kinds of motions because as the chair said, there are a lot of really important pieces of legislation coming before you in a relatively short amount of time, and we will expect amendments too. So if the process can go smoothly, then the debate can really be the thing to focus on, and not the procedures or going back to make sure something was clearly stated. And also just for consistency and a little bit of uniformity, so everybody's comfortable and familiar. And also it helps the clerks out too. So when they're trying to follow the process and write their minutes afterwards. So what a motion basically starts the action of discussion and decision making. What you want to do when you make a motion is to state the action you want the group to take. So I move that we approve ordinance 2024-510, or I move that we approve amendment number 1 to ordinance, whatever. Sometimes I'm hearing a motion to so I move ordinance something, or I move amendment number 1. What you have to remember is be really clear about what the action is that you want to take. So it's approving something, or basically it's going to be approving something, because we want to always keep it in the positive and not start with a negative motion, which we don't hear too often.
Not to
But
say it can't be voted down. So the negative of that is voting down the motion.
yeah,
But as opposed to say, I move to consider, or I move amendment 1, or I move resolution 2024-523, the point here that is trying to be made is I move approval of.
correct. Right, because that's the action that you want on the table for consideration and action. So the motion must be seconded. We all know that. Some jurisdictions don't require that, and Robert's Rules of Order, the basic rules do require a second, but Roberts has a small section on rules for small boards, which it considers to be about 12 or fewer, and it doesn't require a second for small boards, but the council has adopted that as part of its rules of procedure in the code. And so you guys are good about that. Every once in a while it gets skipped because you want to get right into the debate. And you can second a motion even if you disagree with it, so that you have the opportunity to say why it's a bad idea. So that you can do that. So we have a motion. It's been seconded. The chair then needs to state the motion. So a council member will move approval of ordinance 2024-510. There's a second. The chair will then repeat that. So the motion has been made and seconded to approve ordinance 2024-510. And that's really important because for a couple reasons. First, you're restating the motion. That gives the maker the opportunity to say, no, that's not what I said, to clarify. So there's that. And then also, once it's been moved, seconded, and the chair states the motion, it belongs to the whole body. So somebody on their own can't withdraw at that point. You can't make a friendly amendment, which I'll talk about briefly shortly. At that point, any action to that motion belongs to the body and will require the approval or not of the body. So in committee, just the committee order is a little different than the order that you go through in council. So I'll start with committees. So you have a proposal on your agenda and you go right to the clerk to read it into the record. You get the staff overview, you go right into committee discussion, and possibly amendments. So again, for an amendment in committee, it's the same as you do in council. Somebody will move approval of amendment number 1 to ordinance 2024-510. There's a second. The chair states the motion. And we don't want to, again, don't just say it's been moved and seconded. You want to say what was moved and seconded, so that the maker can say, yeah, that's correct, or that's not, if it is incorrect. So then you have the debate. And then again, before you vote on the motion to amend, the chair will once again restate what's before you for the vote. So chair will state, after discussion has concluded, the chair will restate the motion. So we have before us a motion to approve amendment number 1 to ordinance, whatever. And then you take a voice vote, or if it is a roll call vote, that occurs. And then again, the chair will state the result of the vote, and it's not motion passes or it prevails on a vote of 4-1, but what was it? So the ayes have it, and amendment number 1 is adopted or approved. So it's that just extra step of repeating what it is that happened, what the action was that the body took.
The real purpose of this briefing is so you don't get frustrated with me to be a broken record during our meeting.
It's a lot of repetition, but then everybody's on the same page, and everybody needs to understand what's going on, and it's just in fairness to everybody, so that when you're debating and taking these important actions, y'all know what the action is that you're taking, and so does the clerk. Okay, so then in committee, you have something that's amended. The chair will then call for a motion on the proposal that's before you in committee. Again, the vice chair, whoever he or she goes to, it's not so moved. It's like, at that point, you'll say, and the cheat sheet should be there in committee, and we're gonna update that to add a couple things to it for you. But so the motion then in this case would be, I move that we roll all amendments or the amendment that you just made into a substitute and forward proposal O 2024-510S to the full council with a due pass recommendation. So it's a lot to say, but it explains what the action is that you're doing. Again, a second. Chair calls for a voice vote on the motion and then you repeat the motion. And then once the vote is taken, whether it's voice vote or roll call, again, the chair will state the result, including the full action of what was done. So the ayes have it. Proposal, or all amendments are rolled into a substitute. Proposal O 2024-510S is forwarded to the council with a due pass recommendation done. So it's really clear what's happening. There's just a couple extra steps that you take in council, because you start right off with a motion to get the ordinance or resolution before you, right? So at council, typically the chair will go to the vice chair, or maybe whoever's the sponsor of a particular proposal, ask for a motion. So the motion is going to be, I move that we adopt resolution R 2024-110, let's say. So not just I move the resolution, but I move, what is the action that you want the body to take? I move adoption, or I move that we adopt resolution R 2024-110. It does require a second. Again, chair's going to restate that motion so everybody knows what it is, and not just it's been moved and seconded, but that we adopt resolution R 2024-110. So then, as we do, the clerk will then read it into the record. You have discussion. The amendment process is the same as we just talked about in committee. You can make the amendments, voice vote. Always before a vote, the chair is going to restate what the amendment is, so everybody knows before what they're voting on, including the full action. And then in council, then following discussion, following the amendments, following public comment, and then when everybody's concluded their debate and discussion, the chair will ask for a vote on the proposal, maybe as amended, let's say, and you'll again restate what it is. So you'll be asking the council to vote on approving our 2024-110 as amended, if that's what happened. And then roll call vote again. The chair will call the clerk will call the roll. The chair announces the result of the vote. So on a vote of 5-2, for example, resolution R 2024-110 as amended is adopted. just one note, so at council on the final vote, if you take something that's adopted and approve it, you don't have to roll it into a substitute. We would roll it into a substitute only if it's going somewhere else after the vote. So in committee, you do that. If you were to continue it at council to another meeting for further consideration and amendments, then you'd roll it into a substitute. But if you're done, it's the final action, you don't need to roll it into a substitute. So you just approve it as amended. So just a couple notes on withdrawing a motion. Again, once the motion's been made and seconded and the chair states the motion, it belongs to the body. So even after some discussion, if a member decides, oh, I kind of had it wrong, I'll withdraw my motion. You can't do it without agreement of the body. So in those cases, typically the chair will just say, without objection, is it okay to withdraw this motion? It's up to the body still. And the person who seconds isn't involved. You don't have to withdraw your second. A person could withdraw the motion before the chair restates it. So you could do that. But that usually it happens after some discussion anyway. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on was friendly amendments, which I don't see that too often, but every once in a while it sometimes happens. Again, once the motion's been made, seconded, and the chair restates it, it belongs to the body. So even if it's couched as a friendly amendment, it's just a regular amendment and you have to treat it that way by voting on it the same way. And it's going to count against the number of only one amendment to an amendment. So keep that in mind too. But so that was a super quick overview of motions. These are the things that you encounter daily in committee and at council. So I guess at this point, I'd ask if you have questions.
Are there questions for Ms. Long? Thank you for going over that, especially as we enter a really, really busy time for the council. Again, all of this is to make sure we're on the same page and we have abundance of clarity about what we're debating with our very important decisions. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Long, for the refresh. I kept visualizing dinosaurs, so.
Yeah, I know.
Is the plan, I think I heard you say you were going to update these little half sheets. I've used these pretty regularly when I'm doing committee work, but I know I'm one of those people that I just during council meetings saying I move. I don't think I usually use approval or adoption. It's pick the word of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll update those. Julie's not here, but we've been working on some, just some little tweaks to make it more accurate. And also adding amendment language.
Okay.
Yeah.
At council, because like this
Oh, at
specifically,
council.
like I don't even bother to look at this because it says it's for committee only, so
Yeah, okay, so I've only seen the committee one. So is there not a council one at all?
not maybe only in the chair's hands.
Okay,
So,
okay, we'll make
yeah.
one.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, just need a, if you just do a
Yeah,
full sheet of paper, maybe, as opposed to something we need to flip, but
yeah.
that
we'll
might
do
be helpful. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Councilmember Morel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Long, for the lessons, always learning. Just a quick question. This is kind of a little bit off that subject, but when you want to call for the question,
Mhm.
can anyone call for the question at any point of the discussion, or is there a point that you could find, you call it, whether that be 20 minutes into it, 2 hours into it, 5 minutes into it? How do you call the question?
Well, I'd say the first thing is that every member has the opportunity to speak at least once during debate. So it would be out of order prior to that if everybody had not had an opportunity to speak. You can go back for a second round if everybody's in agreement. But yeah, you don't want the debate to last forever, because one of the values of it or purposes of Roberts is to allow you to conduct efficient meetings. So after everybody's had the opportunity and nobody really wants to speak a second time, you can call for the question and you don't have to keep asking people, for additional comments.
Okay, but you have to give everyone the opportunity to speak at least once.
Mhm.
If they say
They can pass.
they can pass,
Mhm.
and okay. The other quick question is, we get resolutions and we get ordinances.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is in their effect. So an ordinance carries the force of law. It can be codified. It can be an ordinance without codification, but it does carry the force of law. Resolutions do not carry the force of law. They can be statements of a policy that aren't law. They can be approving or confirming appointments. They can be requests to the departments to do XYZ. So the major difference is whether it has the force of law or not.
And as far as the budget goes, do they have to be ordinances when we're changing budgetary numbers or moving money around? Does that have to be in the form of an ordinance?
Yes. Yes, and I'll say you do actually within the budget, often in provisos, say, once the department does XYZ and reports back to the council, we will release, certain funds by resolution. They've already been appropriated, so the appropriation has to be done by ordinance. And so again, if you're gonna change the appropriation by moving money to a different fund or a different project, that would have to be done by ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Cruver.
Thank you, Chair. I understand I'm calling the question. It requires a 2/3 vote to do that too.
It does
debate.
because you're stopping debate. Usually you don't, it doesn't
Don't generally,
often
but-
happen because when everybody's had the opportunity, are there any more comments from members? No, and we go ahead and take the vote, so.
But if it were something that just was maybe more contentious, it would require 2/3.
It would, and that is for exactly that reason, because another kind of value of Roberts is it does protect the rights of the minority while allowing the majority to rule. One of those rights is to be able to speak, and so, because it cuts off debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Thanks for your patience, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Long, for going over that to make sure we're all on the same page and again, and be able to, everyone to have their ability to contribute equally here and our staff to be able to support us properly. We're at item number 5, other business. We're going to move to our communication manager and public information officer, Mr. Dominique, for an update.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Just have a few quick updates for you this afternoon. In your packet, you have a Native Alaskan and Native American Heritage Month proclamation. I anticipate the executive is going to join the council in signing on that. I've been working with his office, so we should get something back from him shortly. And this proclamation is going to head to Rules and Operations next week for scheduling. And last week I mentioned we had some new recognitions we were going to do. I have some quick updates on that. I've connected with Representative Kilmer's office to schedule an opportunity for the council. We're tentatively looking at December 3rd, but we got to work with the schedule on that. And then we have some Superior Court judges that are retiring, and the plan right now is we'll do all of the judges at one time, and we'll do that at the District 4 and District meeting. And then I had mentioned last week that Jair was going to be back. Unfortunately, as you can see, he is not. He needed to get some information from his doctor before HR would give him a return to work date. He has that now. HR has that. I've confirmed that we can accommodate what the doctor requires that we accommodate for. So he'll be back on Monday. And pending any questions, that's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. Dominique? I don't see any. Thank you. Is there any other business by members? Ms. Long, any other business before we enter into an executive session?
No, not today, thank you.
Can you state the purpose of the executive session, please?
Right, so this is an executive session authorized by RCW 4230-110-1G. The purpose today is to review the performance of a public employee according to statute, discussion by the governing body of salaries, wages, or other conditions of employment generally applied shall be discussed in a meeting open to the public. And when the governing body elects to take final action in hiring, setting the salary of an individual employee or class of employees, or discharging or disciplining an employee, that action shall also be taken in a meeting open to the public. And as we do, the chair will state the time at which we'll return to an open session. And for the public, there is only one item following this adjournment. There will not be any further action by the council today.
Thank you. So why don't we move right into it, because we do have a 3 p.m. meeting, but let's give folks 5 or 6 minutes to have a human break. We've been going at it for some time. So we're gonna be in executive session till 2:05, but members, we're not gonna start in here for another 5 or 6 minutes, but we'll be back for the purposes of adjournment and in recess for executive session until 2:05 p.m.
Yeah. I got like 2.
3, 2, 1.
The council is back from its executive session. The time is 2:06 p.m. There being no further business before the Pierce County Council in our Tuesday study session, we are adjourned.